All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at domain and range of quadratics. We've already done domain and range quite a bit. It's just been a while. Remember, domain is all your x values and range is all your y values. So remember, x's run left to right, range runs up and down. So let's look at what we have for quadratics. All right, so let's talk about what domain and range mean again, because this is something important. So sets of all possible x values or input values, which will output real numbers for y. So that's domain. These are all your x's. And again, the domain runs from left to right. Now, range are all your possible y values or output. And this is when you have x values have been input into a relation. So that's how they are related to each other. All right, so here's a graph of a parabola. This graph opens up, so it has a minimum. And that minimum is right here. So this is our minimum. Okay? So when we're talking about the domain and the range is related to the minimum. So, or the maximum. So I'll put both here. So this is max or min. And so when we're talking about the domain, we're talking about going from left to right. So let me switch up colors here. So domain is this piece. So we're talking about going from left to right. Now, if you notice, there are these arrows here at the end. These arrows show that this graph actually continues from left to right in both directions. And it continues and continues and continues. So in this case, this would be all real numbers. Or remember, we use that fancy R symbol. So either one of these mean the same thing. So domain is going to be all real numbers in most cases. Now, the only time that would be different is if there's not arrows, of course. Now let's talk about the range. The range are those values from, in this case, we're looking at the bottom up, okay? So the bottom in this case looks like it's a -2. In this case, in most cases, it's also going to be the y value of the vertex. So all of the values that we're looking at are greater than -2. So we're going to say y is greater than or equal to -2. Now, the only time that would be different again is if there aren't arrows. If there are closed circles, then that would change things a bit. So let's see if we have some more to look at here. All right, let's go ahead. Let me shift this guy over. I'm going to go ahead and find all of these things. Let's go ahead and start with our vertex, which happens to be, well, let me use a different color here, which happens to be right here. So our vertex looks like it is actually at, that's the x value for the 2. I was like, wait a minute, I couldn't tell. So it looks like this would be the origin. So we're looking at a vertex of 2, 0 for our vertex. Axis of symmetry is the value that we have for x. So the axis of symmetry would be x equals 2. In this case, we have a minimum. So that minimum is actually at 0. So let's go ahead and do the range first. So the minimum is here. So we're looking from here up, right? So in this case, it's all the y values that are greater than or equal to 0. When we talk about the domain, these again continue in both directions. So this would be all real numbers. No. All right, yet again, we have a different situation here. So it looks like this would be our vertex. So as far as our vertex is concerned, we have a -3, -1. So that means the axis of symmetry is x equals -3. There's that imaginary line that cuts that parabola into two equal halves. This time though, we have a maximum. So because of that maximum, we're talking about here and down for the range. So let's go ahead and do the range first. So this would be all the y values that are less than or equal to, and it looks as though we are at -1. Well, and that's where this comes from. So for our domain, once again, because it continues in both directions, this would be all real numbers. Now for this before. Last one, I'm going to kind of switch it up a little bit. Let's say that I have the graph ends here. So we're going to treat this a little bit differently. So those arrows, let's see here if I can. So this isn't there. Okay, we're stopping there. So vertex, same spot. Down here, it looks like it's at, is this the same? This one is at 0, -2. So that means our axis of symmetry is x = 0 or the y-axis. Okay? In this case, we do have a minimum. So the minimum is actually where y is, we're going to have these two symbols because it's sandwiched between. It goes from +2 down to -2. So -2 up to 2. So remember, when you're doing the range, you're going from the bottom up. Now the domain is going to be handled very similar. So the domain goes from here to here. So it has a starting and a stopping point. So in this case, it also goes from -2, all the way up to +2. So this one's a little bit different. That's if you have those closed circles at the end.